Welcome everyone to the Berkeley Global Leaders in Diversity and Inclusion Speaker Series. Today we have a conversation with Nichelle Grant, Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Siemens USA. My name is Jill Finlayson and I'm the Director of the EDGE Initiative, EDGE and Tech Initiative at the University of California. Our mission is expanding diversity and gender equity in tech. I'm here today with Ramu. Ramu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks Jill. It's great to be here. My name is Ramu Nagappan. I'm one of the assistant deans at UC Berkeley Extension and Berkeley Global, and I'm excited about our conversation.
Thanks so much. And so am I. Our conversation is with Nichelle Grant, who is the Head of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion at Siemens USA. Nichelle guides the DEI strategy. Her 20 years with the Siemens business includes developing go-to-market strategies, focusing on customer experience, and driving operational excellence. This, combined with her passion and commitment to the cause, will position the company exceptionally well with stakeholders across the country. Grant has been involved with diversity and inclusion at Siemens for over 10 years, which has included voluntarily leading employee research groups, diversity councils for Siemens USA, and more recently, she has played an integral role working with supply chain and procurement teams to increase supplier diversity efforts. For many customers, this is core to doing business with Siemens. Grant's leadership in diversity and inclusion extends far beyond human resources and has a much broader reach into topics that drive change and impact in the workforce, workplace, and marketplace. Grant will drive a more holistic approach to building and leveraging a workforce that mirrors the diversity of our customer base, of Siemens customer base, suppliers, partners, and society. She strives to help Siemens continue to drive an inclusive work environment that actively involves every employee's ideas, knowledge, perspective, approaches, and styles to maximize business success. And she systemically addresses, through data and analytics, customer diversity requirements that are now prerequisites and conditions for both routine and complex contracts. Grant is a graduate of Michigan State University with a BS in zoology and a master's degree from Roosevelt University, and she is a certified diversity executive. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you join us today, and I'm very interested in how you went from go-to-market to growing employee resource groups and equity. So maybe tell me a little bit about how you came to this work.
Oh, thank you so much. Hello, Jill. Hello, Ramu. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our dialogue today. Man, where does my story begin? You know, I come from a long line of champions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I can remember being involved throughout my childhood, even with key causes that make society better. And then throughout my college years, I was always a champion and involved in student on-campus DEI efforts. And throughout my professional career, I've continued that. I have this passion even to the point of being certified in diversity and inclusion. And at Siemens, it really started with being a volunteer. I volunteered for our employee resource group. And DEI spans many different topics, but collectively, they're all important to me because no matter what I do, I have a responsibility to really drive positive change and leave society better than I found it. So that's why I'm in this work.
Fantastic. Let me introduce Ramu and have you take a question, Ramu.
Sure, that sounds great. So the question that we've asked everyone in this speaker series is about mandate. So, what is your mandate at Siemens, and how do you measure success, and what are all the things that go into that that process of assessment?
Well, I still stated I've been with Siemens over 20 years, and I've seen Siemens evolve on this D&I journey for years. And I'm proud of Siemens and what we've been able to accomplish, and I'm excited to see the organization continue the journey even globally. My charter as head of diversity, equity, inclusion really is about strategically driving multiple ways the organization can leverage our differences, right? We all have differences. We need to achieve our business goals and outperform our competitors and really exceed our customer expectations. So in addition, we also want to cultivate an inclusive climate. Now, in order to do that, I have to work with various parts of the organization. So it's not just HR, it's the operating and strategic companies really applying our diversity initiatives across the organization so that it impacts revenue, order intake, people, our brand, our suppliers, even our customers. And I think that, our mandate is that the DEI that spans across all the nooks and crannies of the organization really is what lets us drive it. It's not saying that DEI is over here and the business is over here. It's how we do business. And so when we talk about measurement, we look at our employee surveys, we look at data, but we found that when we focus on impactful actions, the success of that really allows us to really see those metrics. We don't want it a check the box type of mentality. We want it to be maintain a mentality that answers questions like, how do you tap into the employees' ideas, tap into employees' knowledge and perspectives? How do we maximize our business success? And so when we look at my goal and I look at my goals of how to lead this, it's about being more transparent on what we're doing, how we're doing it, communicating with the organization so that people get on board, right, with this wonderful journey that we're on.
I think it's really important what you're saying about avoiding the check the box mentality. I think that's the kind of crucial approach, for any organization. But what's the view from the top? How does the senior leadership or the C-suite support you in all of your work?
Our CEO, Barbara Humpton, has led the way. She is an exemplary leader in championing diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. Barbara's view, as heard her say many times, is that having a workforce drawn from all segments of society really is the right thing to do and a core part of what makes us successful, right? As a business, part of our business strategy. But it's not just the CEO, right? It's the whole C-suite, our champions, and they cascaded down through the organization with business imperatives, conversations, communicating internally and externally, working with our customers, taking a look at how we are embedding diversity, equity, inclusion in the businesses. Because it can't sit with one person. It can't just sit with one department. It's got to be across the whole organization. So having that C-suite effort, really driving it from the top down, is part of the formula for success, right? And to embed it into the organization is so key for that continual, long-lasting effort versus just putting it all on one person. But our CEO, Barbara Humpton, is definitely a champion from the beginning.
What would you say, thinking about the work that you're doing, what would you say have been some of the quick wins, and what do you think are the long projects that just require more time?
Well, I'm not sure I'll call anything a quick win, right? Everything happens over time. Even what we've been doing for diversity, equity, inclusion, one of the important focuses is continuing to provide that customer experience, right? Everybody talks about customer experience. Well, part of that is diversifying our suppliers. You mentioned it a little bit in the opening, but our supplier diversity program really tells our customers and our community what we value. Who are we working with, right? How are we bringing in the latest and greatest technologies? We are a very innovative technology company, but we can't do it all. So who we partner with really makes a difference. And so over the past year or so, we really faced that healthcare, economic, societal crises, but our strength is the teams coming together. And that's not just within Siemens, but it's also with our suppliers. We have 24,000 suppliers and a quarter of them are small and minority owned. And that's really good because that allows us to really commit to bringing that diverse business to the supply chain, greater value, more innovation. And something we've done is really lately is award dollars and grants to Black-owned businesses in 7 cities. And that's helping cultivate new business, right? Bringing new things in. I would say, though, diversity, equity, inclusion becomes a lens to identify, develop, and advance business. So another quick win would be our employee resource groups. When we started this whole journey, I would say 10 plus years ago, we had one employee resource group. It was the women's ERG. I remember it so clearly. They said, well, let's just start with one and let's see how it goes. And now here we are 10 plus years later, really talking about 9 employee resource groups nationally with tens of thousands of people volunteering their time on top of what they do day to day for Siemens, because they're passionate about and want to see diversity, inclusion included at Siemens. And they really bring that grassroots passion about advocacy, development, hone their leadership skills, mentoring. We have executive sponsors that help drive that. And I think partnering with the ERGs and the businesses together really helps make us a better company culturally. So those are just a couple of the quick wins.
Those are great examples. And actually going to the first one, the supply chain, how did you change the processes and practices to make the supply chain more inclusive? If there's another company out there that wants to do that, what did you have to put in place to make that work?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One, we had a core team, right, that really focuses on it, that allowed us to, what's our baseline? Where are we starting from in terms of what suppliers we have? How do we pick our suppliers? How do we go to market with our customers? What markets are we in? And when we say suppliers, we're not just talking about suppliers for the projects we have with our customers. There's suppliers in legal, there's suppliers in marketing, where do we get our pencils from, right? All of those suppliers count too. So holistically across our organization, multiple businesses, we had to see a baseline. And then we put together, well, where is it where we want to be? And how do we build a curriculum so we could teach people to source differently? We could teach our salespeople to engage procurement up front. We could teach people how to think about outside the box of other suppliers. We talked to the different supplying sources to be able for them to be able to be a part of our supply base, right? And so that we can build up our funnel of suppliers to choose from. And so all of that had to come together over a period of time to be able to kind of stand up a refreshed diversity program so that we could do more broadly across the organization. And we're not done. You're never really done doing that, right? It's always evolving, always continuous. And I would say, once a year, you have to kind of take a look at it. What are we doing well? What do we need to change? What pieces are we missing? How do we bring more suppliers in? And that could be veterans, women-owned, LGBTQ+. It could be lots of different diversity of suppliers across the board.
Yeah, I really like that, because it's something that people don't always think about when they think about DEI, and it is integrated into how you do business. It's not something in addition to doing business. It's literally how you are finding your suppliers.
So Siemens is a huge company. It's a global company, and it's an old one, right? It's older than the state of California. So given the fact that Siemens spans so many sectors, industry, energy, healthcare, mobility, and a number of other things we were talking about before we even got started, how do you address the differences? Are there different strategies you need to employ for different sectors? How do you bring all these pieces together?
Yeah. Well, let's see. If you're asking me how things change in such a large organization, I think we can agree that none of us saw 2020 coming, for sure, right? And our response to that really makes change more tangible, right? It really accelerated our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy. And across a large organization such as this, you really have to have champions at all levels. And we have to kind of look back and go, okay, how do we bring this messaging at all levels of the organization so that everybody feels included and that they belong and that they feel they have something to contribute? And when you take a look at that, it allows you to give people tools that they can use within their circle of influence, right? We're not trying to have one person change the whole organization. We're trying to have people do what they can within their circle of influence. And when you put those collectives of circles together, collectively as an organization, you see change move, right? You see things happen. So whether you're small, medium, large, right? The key to change is remembering that we're really working with human beings. Mm-hmm. Humans' needs, feelings, opinions, ideas, they want to be engaged. And it takes a lot of patience. Change really takes time.
And what do you do when you encounter resistance from certain pockets or people?
You know, I'm laughing because I was speaking with someone the other day, and I'll share this real quickly. I was sharing my dream that my dream is everyone is on board with DEI and agrees that it's important not only for business, but for society in general, right? But we recognize that our country is divided. We recognize that not everyone is on board with DEI. And when you have a company as big as ours, right, with 40,000 plus employees serving 50 states and Puerto Rico, it's really unrealistic to think that every single person has the same differences are mirrored in our workforce. And so we really want to confront that, right? We have to learn that this is a process and we have to have strong messaging. We have to have consistency. We have to state our principles and where we stand as a company. But ultimately, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. And one of our examples that comes to mind is our approach when we rolled out Courageous Conversations, talking about it. And even if people don't agree, we still need to treat others like they want to be treated. And to do that, we need to know more about who you are, right? What's your background? Where did you come from? And listen to understand a different view that's different from your own. That's how you begin to break down those walls of discouragement, those walls of resistance, because it's kind of like people have that aha moment, like, oh, I never thought about it like that. It's really amazing how conversation really and communication, open communication, really makes change move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned COVID, but of course there were the racial justice movements. We've of course had Me Too. When we look at all of these, changes that have really come to the fore, really, I think, have hit ahead like they haven't in recent history. Mm-hmm. How has that changed your job, and how has that changed your efforts? You mentioned the courageous conversation, but has this caused changes in other benefits or practices?
Well, let's see. There's quite a bit there. When I think about how it's changed in terms of the job, I think we really are trying to look at engaging employees on topics that are vital to our business. Inclusion, diversity, equity. Each one of those is a business imperative. It's not like you can have diversity and not do the inclusion part, or vice versa, right? And equity is that fairness across the board. It's all important. And it's really not about a separate program. And again, if we embed it, when we have something such as we've had in this last years, an awakening, right, on all those different topics, we're not trying to change people's thinking necessarily about politics or about race or how they go about living, but it's really about talking to each other, embracing those different perspectives, being a part of the movement to become more inclusive. You have to bring diversity in, include people, treat them fairly, and give them fair opportunity. And what you'll see is that your business, your organization, wherever you apply that, will grow, will blossom, and you'll be more diverse of thought. You'll have different views. The outcome will be more richer because you've been able to not homogenize how you think about it. You're diversifying how you think through things. There's lots of different things that have changed, though.
Yeah, and I was thinking, specifically of, the disproportionate impacts of COVID on especially people with children at home. Have you had to do anything in response to that?
Yeah, actually, not necessarily just that, just working remotely in general, right? Our company has said at least 2 to 3 days a week permanently work remote, right? We realized that the company wouldn't break, right, if we worked remotely, and you're forced to do that, where a few months ahead, if somebody had suggested, they probably said, oh, that's not going to work. But it's amazing, right, what the pluses that come out of something like this, where you're able to say, oh, this works, why go back, right? This is the new normal. And it's not just those that have children, right? There's lots of people with lots of different situations that allow them to have the flexibility to be able to work with their situation, whatever it may be, because of this new way of working in terms of remote working.
Yeah, I totally agree. This has been a game changer, which, does lead us to the question of like, what innovations do you want to keep and what do you want to roll back? What do you want to bring now that the vaccines are rolling out? Is there something that you want to get back, or are there things that you want to keep?
Well, everybody probably has their own views on this. I think the number one thing that we do want to get back to once it's safe is that direct human interaction, right? I don't think there's anything that can replace that human face-to-face conversation, touch, what have you. And so that's important to have that, to some degree within the society. But other things, right? Just as we're talking here, this particular digital tools have really opened up the ability to more people to be involved. I remember where we used to have meetings at the physical level, and it's kind of like, well, only so many people could come, right? Because you either had to travel or you had to, you only had so much room in the conference room. But with this digital tools, you're able to invite more across the globe to be a part of conversations that they normally would maybe miss out on. And so there's different things like that allow us to really kind of think through, what do we need to change and what do we need to keep? And how do we move forward to make this even better?
So changing gears a little bit, wanted to talk a bit about hiring and recruitment, which is a topic a lot of us care about deeply. It's really the future of any organization depends on new talent. So in what ways has hiring changed, or how do you think it might change in the future because of your initiatives?
Great question. Even before the challenges of this past year, we recognize the importance to hire for the future, right? As a digital technology company, the impact on every industry we are involved in, whether it's healthcare, education, et cetera, it really requires those advances. We call it the fourth industrial revolution. And being at the forefront of that really requires us to build 21st century skills in the workforce. And so we want to be able to bring these workers in so that we can run and maintain the infrastructure America needs, even across the globe. And so our talent acquisition, head of our talent acquisition, Diane Circle, and her team really have developed what we call the talent acquisition strategy. And it's designed to emphasize the enablement of partnerships and collaboration between talent acquisition, hiring managers, and outside sourcing, so that we can not only attract people, but we also can want to recruit and hire a diverse pool of talent. Now, the talent acquisition team really has established a diversity and inclusion alliance. And this is phenomenal. I'm really proud of this because what they've been able to do is bring these groups of people together with the skill set about talent acquisition And the goal here is to arm and educate the broader recruiting teams on the different strategies to source or engage or even convert, right, hiring of talent for underrepresented groups. And we've partnered with outside organizations to do that too, such as the National Society of Black Engineers, or Society of Women Engineers, or the Hispanic Society for Engineers across the US. And DEI plays a critical role in this, right? Diane and I work together quite often because the talent exists everywhere. You know, when somebody says, well, we can't find the right people, we don't know where to look, we're just not looking in the right places. Talent is everywhere. And our view is that we really need to cultivate a full range across society. So what's changed, right? So as we're thinking about this, you know, we kind of go about our talent acquisition and hiring managers go about their, how do we think about this differently? Well, one way is that we're thinking about how do we facilitate more hiring from the community college or technical college, apprenticeships for the youth. You know, promoting that lifelong learning too is important, because even though you're out of the school, that doesn't mean you don't stop learning. We are always learning. And as you learn through your career grows, you have different paths you can take. And we want to be very intentional on developing people while they're here, right? Because that future of their career could be one of the experiences they have while they're working here at Siemens. And so that's really important. And there's 460,000 jobs out there in the manufacturing today. We need to fill those jobs so people can help keep the infrastructure going, make a living, and be fulfilled in life.
So it sounds like you've made really impressive investments in talent acquisition. And you just spoke a little bit about cultivating teams once they're on board. Can you say a little bit more about retention and how you keep great people and support them during their careers?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we do is when you come into Siemens, you know, depending on what your role is, there's paths, right? So it tells you the different developmental paths in terms of training. We can pair you with a mentor, so you have people to kind of look to and bring you in. Even from day one, before you even start with Siemens, you get a letter from our CEO telling them about the experience you're going to have as being an employee of Siemens. We walk through different training paths that allow them to really understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the importance right up front to the organization. But then as you go through your career, there's so much going on within Siemens. There's opportunities to not only do the job you're hired to do well, but be a part of special projects, to experience different leaders, to be able to shadow different people. We go through what we call Own Your Career, and it allows people to not only build their profile, do job shadowing, it allows them also to be able to take a look at what we call a strength scope tool. How do you leverage your strengths? What are your strengths? Oh, here are your top 7 strengths. How can you apply them further in your job that you're doing now and maybe perhaps your future job? And then there's tools that we use that allow them to think through their career. What do you want to be when you grow up, right? And that's really important, because we're not only here to do the job, but we also want you to, again, have that great experience while doing it.
When you think about retaining people, there's also the flip side, which is attrition. How much visibility do you have into if people are leaving, why are they leaving, and how do you source that information and use it to change practices?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think that the way we like to approach this is the end-to-end of employee life cycle, right? Understanding what attracts them, and then also understanding why would they leave Siemens, right? And if we can understand both on both ends and all in between, we're able to reapply what we learned from them in order to say, well, let's change some of this in order to have better retention. Let's do some of this differently so that we can attract more to the organization. So I think there's various inputs that allow us to be able to get an understanding of why people come and go, right? While I would love for everybody to just stay at Siemens forever, right? People kind of move on and do different things, which is fine. But it's important for us to understand what we could do as an organization to retain those people. And I think it's important to ask those questions before they get to the door to leave, right? To some regard, it may be too late by that time. And so let's have that dialogue while you're here, right? What can we do to enhance your experience? What can we do to make your job easier? Do you have any innovative ways to make things more efficient? Really engage them so then they belong, right? Because belonging really transforms that culture.
Yeah, and I think that that's a conversation that's really come forward is, do people feel like they can be their authentic self in the workplace? And so that's, I think, one of the things that's changing. How else do you see talent management as a whole changing? There's a lot of technology coming in, AI-enabled tools for HR. How do you see these technologies changing what you do, hopefully making things better, but are there things you're concerned about as well?
Yeah, well, like I said, Diane Circle, again, our head of talent acquisition, she's doing a great job of bringing all those different aspects in. I can't begin to even list all the different things that they're doing, but definitely we are taking a look at how technology impacts how we recruit, as well as the partnerships we have with various organizations from different demographics. And then I think the key is that dialogue with that hiring manager, right? Not putting the onus only on that talent acquisition manager, but also working with the business. The business is the one doing the hiring, right? And so we want the business to have the best candidates possible in front of them to be able to be considered. That diverse slate of candidates will allow them to pick people to fill the positions. And whether it's leveraging technology, whether it's video interviewing, whether it's who we partner with, external sourcing, it all kind of comes together in terms of how we go about that. Now, I would say that it's an evolving thing. All the time, there's something new that comes up that people have honed in as best practices for hiring. But, one of the things that we don't want to get in a rut is to think that DEI is really about the hiring piece. Once we do that, we're done. We did the hiring. It's not. Again, it's throughout the whole process, that whole employee life cycle. You come into the organization, and then throughout, all the things that you do to engage that employee really makes a difference and provide them opportunities for success.
Yeah, I liked your comment earlier about continuous learning, and you even mentioned like the employee resource groups are a way to hone your leadership skills or public speaking or communication. So thinking about how all of those can contribute to the succession planning, right, to bringing more people up that pipeline.
Right, exactly.
So we talked a fair amount this morning about what a tumultuous year it's been. We're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel now, at least as far as the pandemic is concerned, but other questions out there. What are you feeling optimistic about going forward here?
I'm pretty optimistic about it all. Even in the midst of it all, it's kind of like, wow, what are the possibilities here? How do we leverage this opportunity, while as grim as some parts of it may be, to really kind of go, how do we do this differently, right? And I think it's an opportunity for us to address even more on the technology side. How do we address climate change? How do we address sustainability? How do we address diversity? How do we address things in society that allow us to live better, live more inclusive, live more where we can engage others along this journey? And there's a tremendous focus right now, not only on the talent acquisition, the diversity and inclusion, but the workforce, and building that workforce up to be able to handle this new technology. We were having a conversation the other day, how technology is going so fast that the skill sets to be able to service that technology, install that technology, isn't keeping up. And so what can we do as a technology company to help accelerate that, because we're going to need these unique skill sets that don't exist. There's jobs out there that we don't even know we're going to need jobs for, that don't exist for this technology. And so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to really kind of find that fine-tuned way to bring technology to reality, as well as the skills we need in order to service it for the society.
We have a very engaged audience today, and we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. So I think I'm going to jump to the Q&A a little earlier than we usually do and start out with a question that was asked. How do you overcome people who are complacent? For example, opening up an ERG event to the whole organization and people who don't have a vested interest. An example, Black History Month isn't just a month, lots and lots to learn. There has to be an appetite. How do you overcome this?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. You know, what I would say is the first thing, you have to meet people where they're at. Use it as what I call a teaching moment. It's in a moment where people are trying to understand, well, why are we celebrating Black History Month? Well, let me tell you why, right? Why is the ERG for women? Well, let me tell you why. I would love to there not having to be ERGs for each specific one, because we're all inclusive, it's all equal, it's all equitable, right? All of those things are there, and we don't even have to do, we just naturally do it, but that's not how we're built. That's not how society is. And so therefore, we want to make sure that we are putting things in place where we can actually think through some of this. And so when we come up against those that are resistant, you want to use it as a teaching moment. Two, I would say that it's an opportunity to have that courageous conversation with them about, well, tell me more about where you're coming from with this. Why do you think that? Asking questions that allow them to express what they're saying, and then giving you an opportunity to provide them with additional information that can add clarity. You'd be amazed at how many people kind of go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, now I understand. And it's just a matter of communicating for that. Now, you know, technically, if somebody really gets out of hand, we always go back to our business practices that have been set in terms of our policies, right? We have intolerance for violence and different things like that. So we want to make sure that we stay within our compliance and our policies as well.
Great.
So another member of our audience asks this question. There's been some criticism about people volunteering their time. Their passion projects off the side of your desk. It's a lot of work and you have to love it. Why can't companies reward and reinforce people instead of expecting them to volunteer their time?
Say that last part again. Why can't
companies reward and reinforce people instead of expecting them to volunteer their time?
Gotcha. Yeah, you know, everybody's hired to the company to do a particular job. And I think the answer, and we're still not there yet, is to be able to see the importance of what you're doing outside of your day-to-day tasks impacts your day-to-day task, impacts the company. And so whether it's a direct impact to what you do as your day-to-day job, that doesn't mean it's not impactful to the company holistically. And it's an ongoing conversation with managers at all levels about, you know what, this work that I'm doing over here allows me to come back to my day-to-day job and be more innovative, think differently, have a stronger network, allows me to kind of get a different view of the organization and how what I'm doing in my day-to-day impacts the bigger picture. And I don't think we tell that story enough. And so when people say, hey, I want to go over here to this ERG event, the manager's kind of like, oh no, you can't do that because, you know, it doesn't impact your job. It's like, well, it does. And so there's more work to be done there to tell that impactful story, and why ERGs, why diversity, equity, and inclusion, why allowing your employees to blossom outside of their day-to-day allows them to really be a more richer, well-rounded employee when they come back to the group.
And I think that's one of those occasions where if it's part of their evaluation, you get points, right? Like that counts toward advancement, that counts toward, satisfactory or exceptional job performance. If you engage in those activities, that's where I think it would be great.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You know, what gets measured, right, gets done. And so it's kind of like, if you're able to embed that, and some managers are, and some managers don't allow you to put it in there. But, I'd say you always have the option to tell your story. Yes, here's what I've accomplished, and I've also done all these other things. So when they ask me to do my own personal evaluation, I put it all in there because I want record of what I've been able to accomplish across the organization.
I think that's great. Emily Leon asks, do you have an organizational structure and or strategy to support the various subcultures of the company?
I'm not particularly sure what you mean by the subcultures, but we have a strategy around how we are able to engage the different employees. And so different businesses have different setups, right? And so one business may have lots of different locations. One may have lots more manufacturing. One may have people concentrated in a particular area. And so it's our role to work with each of those businesses to do the best structure possible for them and what fits in their business. So I can't peanut butter it across the whole organization and say everyone will do it in this particular manner. And so we have these dialogues with our managers to be able to kind of say, okay, in your organization, what's the best way to engage people? What's the best way to develop them? How do we get your managers on board? How do we put together programs that allow us to meet your business goals? How do we work with your suppliers? All that is unique for each particular one, but it is pretty structured within that particular business.
Great. Yeah, I think that idea of hyper local, hyper customized makes a difference in terms of how you roll out the general themes has to be customized. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, strategically, we kind of say as an organization, here's what we're going to accomplish. Now, how it gets accomplished, each different entity, each different subgroup, if you will, kind of rolls up their actions, and collectively we meet that overarching goal. So we're not pushing down, everybody should do it this way. We're saying, here's what we're trying to reach as an organization. So now what's your contribution? And what's your contribution? And what's your contribution? And collectively, it helps us reach those goals.
The next question is from Brianna. Do you have any resources that would be useful for companies just starting out an intentional D&I program?
Yeah, there are a few links that we could provide that allow you to kind of just get an understanding. I think it's important if you're just starting out, you have to have that foundational understanding of what's that definition of diversity, what's your definition of inclusion, and what's your definition of equity, and what is your current state, right? Where are you as an organization? From the top to the bottom of understanding, here's where we are in our journey. There's a maturity curve out there that you could get as well and kind of see where are we. And once you have that understanding, then you can say, okay, well, let's get to this point then by this time, or then let's move to this point by that time. And what you do within there to move from one to the other will vary. And so I can share those with Jill and Ramu, and then we can share them out to the organization, to the audience.
Fantastic. Alex asks, are there any new approaches to unconscious bias that a global organization like Siemens is using today?
One of the things we're doing, and we're just getting started with it, I guess there's a couple different things. One is reverse mentoring, right? And so a big thing that we're trying to do is, with 5 generations in the workforce, how do we all work together, right? And being able to work together and really respect and understand and hear the various views from those 5 generations allow us to really have that diversity of thought come to the table and be able to thrive as an organization. You put a cross-functional team together, how do you do that? And so when we come to the table now, what we're trying to do is dispel those myths and biases about millennials or baby boomers or what have you. And so we really want to come together with an open mind of, hey, let me hear you and respect what you're bringing to the table. Another thing is then the reverse mentoring is being able to have one generation teach another. You know, traditionally it's like, oh, you've been here years, please mentor me, right? But there's definitely an opening for the reverse mentoring, right? In terms of the younger generation talking with the older generation. Another thing we're doing is what we're calling conscious bias, right? Conscious inclusion. And it's really trying to be a bias interrupter and recognize that, am I making this decision based on bias, or is this non-biased decision? And taking that time to pause and think about what we are doing. You know, traditionally you hear people say, well, we went through unconscious bias training, and that's not just synonymous with DEI. You can't just do one training and now we're all set for DEI. You can't check the box on that. Unconscious bias training is really important, but it's just one sliver of the whole overall pie of making sure that diversity, equity, inclusion is in your organization, is a part of your culture. And each individual is responsible for their bias. So teaching people to recognize it, to be their own interrupter, right, is important. And when they see something, say something, speak up.
I love that. I haven't heard that approach before of really conscious bias, taking moments, taking a time to intercept your own bias. And it also opens that door to the allyship, right? Where if you can do small things, just like microaggressions make people want to leave, micro affirmations make people want to stay. So if you can interrupt that bias, I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. You know, I'm always touting micro affirmations because we do a lot of training on microaggressions, but we also want to balance it out with the positive. What are the positive things you can say that make people feel a little bit more like they're included, makes people not so, oh, you just offended me, right? And so there's definitely a balance between there. And if you Google that, you'll see lots of different examples of both.
Yeah, that's a valid point. You know, people don't always like to have a finger shook at them, like, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. So if you can give people, assume positive intent and give them the tools to do something affirmative rather than always being a punitive system, I think that's really an important aspect to the DEI.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love that formulation, trying to find a virtuous cycle in all of this too.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question someone asks, I'm sure you remember the day when there was no budget for DEI. Now they're hiring directors of DEI at every organization, and they're spending money as an imperative cause. Do you have any comments on this?
Well, you know, I think my first reaction is, well, on the surface, you can't necessarily just say, okay, well, they're spending a lot of money because they hired one person, right? What they have to do then is peel back the onion a little bit and go, okay, where are we putting additional dollars? Because if you remember, diversity, equity, and inclusion is at all levels of the organization in many different aspects. Like I said, all the nicks and crannies of the organization allows you to be able to really support diversity, equity, inclusion. So just because you have somebody at the helm doesn't mean that the organization is set up for support. You got to look at it holistically. So like for myself, right, I'm one person. I only can do so much. I rely heavily on the business leaders, the enabling functions at all levels, and even individual contributors I rely on in order to drive our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy. And so what I don't want employees and organizations to think, well, I hired somebody, so now we're all set and it'll take care of itself. No, it takes everyone to be involved. It takes everyone to kind of own it and do their part.
Yeah, I love the focus on using data-informed decision-making. Our next question is actually about that. It says, one great thing about data behind DEI is showing how many people are hired from a diversity fair or a college recruitment, but it also shows how many of those candidates are still with the company 2 years later. And so this opens up other questions about employee experience. And so how are you looking at evaluating kind of these sources and retention some years later? And does that help you shift your priorities?
You know, I think we're still maturing in that, in terms of that following the trail, right? You know, somebody starts here and then over the years, are they still with us later? I don't know if we've necessarily sliced it like that from, down to the particular person per se, right? We recruited them at this particular fair and oh, look, they're here later. We definitely would love to continue to retain our employees, right? You come into Siemens, we really want you to stay. We want to understand what would retain you, how you engage you. But I think that the data is one aspect of it. And I may have said this before, but what we found is that if you focus on the data, then you're kind of like trying to wait for that number to go up, waiting for that percentage to go up. And really not changing the mindset, the behavior. So I can have the best data, I can have the best processes, I can best strategy, can have a whole structure. But if that mindset of the people, of the employees, no matter what you do for the organization is not right, you won't get that behavior change, which drives the action. The people are driving the action, no matter what your structure is. And so you really want to make sure that people's mindset is right. And then what comes on the back end is the data will show that you've changed minds because you got the actions, which shows in the data.
That's a good point. Data is a lagging indicator. And
Right.
so you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at it. I did see an article, and I can't remember the company now, that found that hiring from San Jose State was actually better than hiring from Stanford because people stayed longer. And so it is an interesting analysis to think about because turnover is so expensive.
Yeah. And it did bring up a good point. One of the things I want to get across is that people are so quick to say, oh, they're not doing anything, I'm going to go. But patience is so key, and waiting it out and seeing it through the journey, right? And being able to kind of go, you know what, over time, this will change, right? And what can we do? And I think the key is bringing the employees along, telling that story. Hey, we know we're not the best, but here's what we're trying to do. Hey, guess what? We've been able to accomplish this. Let's keep moving. Hey, guess what? And so you share the wins as you go along with, hey, we still need to work on this over here. Let's move forward on towards that. And so over this past year, what we've been doing is trying to do more and more communication about it and say, hey, here's what we're doing. Hey, I need your help over here. Any volunteers for this? Different things like that. And if you tell them along the way and not just wait till the end, then they feel like they're a part of that journey.
So there's another question about structure. So Emily asks, how large is the DEI team? I assume your DEI team, and how is it structured to support the organization?
Yeah, well, there is two of us, one myself and one other person that's focused on diversity, equity, inclusion from a communications perspective. The rest are passionate network of volunteers that allow us to be able to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. In addition to, and this is what I think makes it successful, is that in each of the organization's enabling functions, whether it's talent acquisition, right? Whether it's accounting, whether it's finance, whether it's, all those other enabling functions also have a diversity, equity, inclusion champion or group or council. Even the businesses have diversity councils. And what they're doing is collectively taking this strategy that we've put together as an organization and saying, okay, here's how we're doing our part. And so they don't necessarily report directly to me, but what they're doing is they are owning right? Owning the championship of our strategy collectively. And so you may go to a different organization though, and it's a whole different setup. You can't really go, okay, I'm going to mirror that organization or mirror that organization. Each one of us is unique. And so you have to be able to kind of take the bits and pieces that I think are best practices that could work in your culture, and then build your strategy from there. And then start like with just your base, and then move out from there. Don't try to do it all. Try to do just a little bit and add on to it. And over time, you'll look around and go, oh, wow, look what we've really built up, right, in order to support the organization.
I'm going to combine the next two questions into one. So the first person asks, what would you be seeing as the most important attributes for an employee to encourage DEI? So that's the first question. And then Norm Chang asks, is there required training on DEI for Siemens employees each year? And is this part of their performance reviews? So can you talk a little bit about the individual role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the individual role is about, the individual is about couple things. One, speaking up. We have a speak up culture. So if you see something, say something. And there's many different avenues to do that. You can do it anonymously, but we as an organization, like I said, we're unwavering in our compliance and policies in terms of treating people like they want to be treated. So that's important. Two, I would say that it's the individual's responsibility to be able to respect their coworkers, understand their coworker, open up and have dialogue with their coworkers so that they're able to see a different perspective and not just kind of be myopic and okay, I'm only doing what I'm thinking my own thinking, I'm doing my own thinking, and I'm not really bringing in other thoughts and diverse perspectives. In terms of the training, we have lots of training out there, but it's not necessarily required. We're moving in that direction, but it's really not a whole curriculum where it's, oh, here's 3 weeks of DEI training. It's here are the key things that we want you to understand of why diversity is a business imperative, why it's important to be inclusive, how to be an ally, right? And how you're able to thrive as your own individual self and bringing your full self to work. And once you get that, all the rest you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. So we have these knowledge boards that people can go deeper in a particular topic, but it's not mandatory, right? It's voluntary. And when it's voluntary, people who have a passion about it and really want to learn more gravitate to that. And what we want to happen is for me to say, hey, Jill, I took this great training. You might want to check it out. Hey, I had a conversation, Ramu, with so-and-so, guess what I learned? And it's really kind of organic sharing, and then more and more people get on board that way.
Thank you.
So someone asks, could you please provide an example of some of the strength tools you use?
Yeah, so one tool, it's called the Strength Tool, and it asks you a series of questions. And after those series of questions, it allows me to see what are my 7 strengths that I can bring to the table. And each employee has a profile in our internal system that allows us to say, hey, I'm Nichelle Grant, my strength is project management, and I'm really good at communicating and this or that or the other. And it allows people to kind of understand who Nichelle is within Siemens. And then I'm able to really kind of put my best foot forward in terms of here's what I like to do, here's what I do for the organization. And when I get ready to move through my career at Siemens, my profile is something somebody could reference if I were to apply for a job internally. And so the Strength Scope tool allows you to really not hone on where do you need to improve, it hones in on, hey, you have these strengths, let's focus on them and leverage them in the organization. It allows managers to really have dialogues in their one-on-ones with their employees about, hey, I see your strength is XYZ, so let's talk about how we can use that in our team, right? Because I really need your strength of being able to do that particular skill because I'm trying to reach this particular goal, right?
We're going to keep asking you questions for another 10 to 15 minutes, but I wanted to point out that Carol and Dr. Deidre Biles and Nicole all say thank you. They're really enjoying the session, but some people may have to jump. So
okay, well, thank you, everyone.
We're going to keep going. Kavita Agarwal asks, could you speak about broadening the definition of diversity? What is your definition of diversity? How would you suggest a job candidate talk about diversity if it is out of the mainstream definition of diversity, e.g. candidates who is a cancer survivor or a survivor of domestic violence?
Yes. Well, typically, diversity is about, what gender you are, race, or sexual orientation, but we think of it way broader than that, right? It's all those things. And I can share with you that the iceberg, right? All those things you can't see by just looking at me, right? What's my education? What's my experience? What's my perspective? I can go on. And so we look at that broader definition of diversity at Siemens. And then we say, how do we leverage that? And looking at the person collectively of, okay, what is Nichelle bringing to the table that we can leverage? And then how do you bring inclusion, including her, right? And when you take a look at that and you have a conversation with candidates or employees that just start or employees in general, it's really a dialogue of upfront, making sure we have that common understanding of, well, let's just define what we mean by diversity, right? And somebody says, oh, well, we're talking about men and women. Okay, well, no, diversity is larger than that. Again, a teaching moment. And so I think each of us, it behooves us to educate ourselves on what diversity means, and so that we're able to share that in our conversations with our friends, our family, our coworkers, our managers, going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's a continuous learning. To your point, I recently sent out an image to a speaker on one of our panels, and she said, "What is that image of?" Because it turned out she was vision impaired, and I had an embedded alternate text, right? And so this isn't something that starts and ends, as you said, with gender or with ethnicity.
It isn't, and we're more and more trying to be cognizant of all those different ways people take in information and learn, right? So, and then for instance, we do a lot of training, as you can see, on technology and different things, but how do people really take in all that data about a particular instrument, right? Or our process? And are there other ways we can do to provide accommodations and services that allow them to still learn it and do their job, but not just one way with a teacher in front of the classroom training them, right? There's other ways to do the same thing. So I think when we talk about the variety of diversity and what does that really mean, we got to think about it in all different contextual situations.
That's a great segue. The next question, I think, is related to the way you support the many, many different kinds of employees you have. So how does executive sponsorship of employee resource groups work at Siemens?
Yes. Okay, so we have the 9 employee resource groups, and each resource group has an executive sponsor. Typically, an executive sponsor is at least a director level or higher. We want this person to really be empowered to make decisions, an influencer, help keep them appraised of what's going on in the organization, make connections for this employee resource group, to able to network throughout the organization. As you can imagine, it's a very matrixed organization, so it's important to be able to say, well, who can I talk to about, and get an understanding within the organization. And this executive sponsor really has the privilege of working with these phenomenal employees who have kind of said, hey, we're all coming together for this particular cause, and here's what we want to accomplish, and we need you as a leader within the organization to champion behind us. And they may be an executive sponsor for 1 or 2 years. Some roll off, some change different jobs and different things like that, but it's important to always have an executive sponsor. But then what we also have is a lead and a co-lead on a national level of employee resource groups. And what that does is allow people to work together as a team And then they have chapters underneath. So we might have a chapter in Ohio or in Cleveland, Ohio, or Orlando, Florida, or Atlanta, Georgia. And those chapters kind of roll up to these national leaders, and they allow them to really function and cascade information down, cascade back up what we're doing in terms of actions, and that executive sponsors is there to support across all of those various locations.
I love that, because it is difficult to sort of change culture from the bottom up if you don't have that top down support as well. Sushmitha says, hello, Nicole, or Nichelle, sorry. It is an honor to hear you speak today. As a student of HR at Berkeley Extension, I am always struggling with diversity and inclusion. It is a subject that I'm very passionate about. I would love to know how someone like me looking to eradicate racism. I use social media, including LinkedIn, to put myself out there for this cause, but no one seems to be taking it seriously. This has saddened me. Please advise.
Yes, I think I feel it, because every day we are all trying to champion for diversity, equity, inclusion. And yes, we've had great wins, but it's an ongoing, continuous journey for us to be able to continue to fight. Don't give up. Perhaps connect yourself with an organization or a group that has the same goal in mind, so you're not by yourself. The collective of the group together will help drive some of that. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. The way it was read back to me here, that's a huge undertaking that you're kind of putting the weight of the world on your shoulders. What can you do, right? Just kind of nipping at it to do one thing at a time. And okay, I got that. Now let's do this. Now let's do that. And before you know it, you've kind of chipped away at some of that, and you had some what they were calling quick wins, right? Because you need that reinforcement for yourself to be able to go, okay, this is working. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so we will need to continue to recruit and drive this particular topic for a long, long time to come. It is embedded into our systemic structures within our country, and we need to be able to kind of say, you know what, how are we going to make permanent change, right? And yes, there are some things we will do from people to people. There's things we would do in organizations and in terms of our linkages, as well as how do we change it permanently so we don't have to go back to the old ways. There's some things we don't want to do. And so therefore you got to kind of stay the course. Keep going, right? You're making a difference, and bring others with you, and you'll see change happen over time.
Thank you. That's inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. Nichelle, I think you've addressed this a little bit, but maybe you can say a few more words. So Salvador asks, as you cultivate a culture to retain this great talent, how do you nurture a sense of allyship so that there's an environment of support within those different groups?
Yeah. Allyship is really, really important, because what I don't want to do is reverse everything and go, okay, now the straight white man feels excluded. That is not what it is. The straight white man and all the other underrepresented groups, the women, the veteran, all those different groups, all make it diverse, right? You can't take one out and say, okay, now we're diverse. That is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is put more seats at the table. And in order to get more seats at a table, I need that straight white man to be an ally. I need him or her, and I mean him to be able to really kind of champion, okay, yeah, I'm open to thinking through this. And we need to champion each other within all of the underrepresented groups too, right? Women supporting Blacks, Blacks supporting Hispanic, Hispanics supporting Asian, Asians supporting veterans, etc. Right? All those different mixes. We got to support each other. We can't do it in our silos either. And so it's important that we have allyship across the various groups, subgroups, in order to do that. Now, how do you do that? You mix it up, right? You make them do things together, right? Perhaps the Black Employee Resource Group is working with the Asian Employee Resource Group to do something together. You mix it up as a manager and say, okay, we're going to have different teams this time. I'm not going to pick the same people the same time. I'm going to work with this manager over here, and we're going to make some cross-functional teams because we have a common goal we're trying to get to. I'm going to ask for volunteers and outside the organization and to see who we can partner with to learn from them. I'm not going to assume that just because you have children that you won't want to volunteer. I'm just going to ask for volunteers and see who I get. I'm going to be more conscious of my unconscious bias so that I can hear and understand my team better. I'm going to take the time during our one-on-one and really understand from your viewpoint, how's it going? What'll make you stay? How do we keep you engaged? And so there's lots of ways to be an ally, right? And it shows up in multiple different ways, but it's important to be an ally. And you don't have to be an ally just because you're a white male. You can be an ally because you're human. And being an ally is important across the board.
Yeah, I think this whole awareness that people aren't one identity, they have multiple identities, this intersectionality, and sometimes that compounding makes things more difficult, but sometimes that opens doors to other communities. And so I love that idea of bringing these different groups together to champion each other's events and each other's initiatives, I think is fantastic. We're getting close to the end, so I wanted to leave you with kind of one open-ended question around, broadly, what advice do you have for an organization that's looking to hire a leader for diversity and inclusion like yourself, and just advice generally for organizations that are trying to embark on this mission to be more inclusive?
Well, yeah, I think it's important to have a lead person focusing on this important topic. Just like you would hire somebody for a CFO, or, you hire the CEO, or you hire your managers, something's in charge of operations. I think it's important to have somebody focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion. Again, that person can't do it by themselves. It takes the whole organization. But if you find someone who is passionate about this topic, I think that's the first thing, right? Why are they in this? Are they in this to see that positive change happen? You'll get a lot more out of them versus just assigning somebody and say, hey, I'm putting you in charge of it, just go do it. That's not how to do it, right? And there's many different attributes to doing that in terms of making sure that you're hiring the right person from how they're thinking perspective. Do they line up with your culture? Is it a culture fit, as we like to say, around that? But then it's important, I also think, is for them to understand the business or the organization. And so when you're hiring somebody, it's not just anybody, it's somebody that understands how your business works, how it operates, because remember, it's going to cross everything that you do as an organization, not just one particular department. And so if that person understands the business holistically and how each group interact with one another, you're better able to get a leader that's able to drive towards that particular goal.
Really understanding it's a business imperative.
It's a business imperative, right, Jill?
And with that, I think we've reached our time. So first off, I want to thank you, Nichelle, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the time. Love having the conversation with you and Jill as well.
Yeah, and to our audience, thanks for being here today. You've been really engaged, asked fantastic questions. It really livened our discussion today, so thank you.